James Coursier retired at 34, and in this final part of this 4-part video series, he's going to be taking us through his actionable strategy for how he achieved financial freedom and retired at age 34. In this video, he's going to take us step by step through that process, highlighting 2 pre-prepared examples of different ways that people could go through this journey depending on what their priorities are. James, welcome to this episode.
So I won't go into all the detail of like how I did it. That's all in video 1. So check that video out if you haven't already. This video is actually about how do you decide on what strategy you're going to pick? Like what's your plan of actually becoming financially free, making sure it's relevant to you so that you can make sure that the path you're going on will get you to where you need to be. Yeah. So the first thing to think about is what's important to you, because you can have anything, you just can't have everything. So is it that you want to become financially free as quickly as possible? Is it that you want to do it in a nice, easy, relaxed way? Is it you want to do it in a fairly risk-free way, nice and easy? Is it you just don't want to spend so much time and effort on it? Is it there's something specific that you enjoy or don't enjoy that you want to make sure you're factoring in? All right. You've got to start there so that whatever strategy you're picking makes sense to you. Because if not, you're going to get halfway down the line and realize, you know what, this is not getting me what I want. This is too slow, or this is too difficult, or this is too stressful. All right. Or this is too boring. Okay. So like we talked about in previous videos, essentially there's 3 pillars you got to focus on to be financially free. Earn, save, and invest. You've got to be making good, decent income. You've got to be in control of your finances so that you're able to keep your spending in check and be able to save a good amount of that money you're making. Then take those savings, invest it, and making a good, consistent return. That's what you need to do to become financially free. Now, how quickly you want to do it will depend on how much work you need to put into those 3 pillars to be able to speed it up. If you want to take it nice and easy and slow, not too much effort, not too much risk, then you can afford to not spend so much time in these 3 areas because you've got more time to allow it to play out. But then you just need to acknowledge it's just going to take you longer. All right. Most people never get there because they don't even do this at all. So just getting into a situation where you're doing enough of the right things to make sure that you will retire in a healthy place where you're happy, you've got enough money so that you could live a good life by retirement age, or, a good few years before that so you can still have a good quality of life. That might be fine for some people. But if you want to go with a much more ambitious plan in retiring kind of 10 years, 5 years, then you're going to need to spend a bit more effort and time into really getting the most out of these 3 pillars, right? So when it comes to earning, you could just have a good steady wage and just make sure you're getting that. Or you could take steps to make more and more money by getting promotions, going for a better job, right? Going into a more lucrative industry, go freelance, own your own business. When it comes to saving, right, you could just save a little bit consistently, or you could really double down and make sure you're keeping your spending really in check so that most of your income that you're saving and really speed the buildup of that money. And then lastly, with investing, you could take something nice and simple, really low effort, like investing in stocks where you just press a button and it's done. Or you could increase those returns by picking something that requires a bit more effort, like property. And that way you can get even better returns, and then you can speed up the buildup of that money and the amount of money that you can live off from the money you have. So ultimately it's earn, save, invest, and how much time and effort you want to put into that. But if you really strip it back, it really comes down to time and effort versus speed. Yeah, the faster you want to do this, the more time and effort you need to put in to be able to do it. But either way, you've got to make sure you understand the fundamentals, apply it to your own life, and follow through consistently. That is a must and a given to make sure you actually get there. So never risk trying to get there fast over being able to just make sure you get there. That's like super important.
Okay, so before we go into the 2 examples, what are the different options for for that third stage where people have to invest?
So there's loads of things you can pick from, right? You've obviously got stocks, you can invest in gold, commodities, crypto, property. You can invest in businesses, you've got crowdfunding, peer-to-peer, you can invest in collectibles, intellectual property. There's so many things you can invest in, right? But for the vast majority of people, it really just comes down to like three main options. Stocks and other things you can invest in an investment platform like Fidelity or Hargreaves Lansdown, where you're pressing a button and you own it, right? And that could be like stocks or a fund that owns gold or commodities or bonds, right? Government bonds or corporate bonds. Just something where you're pressing a button and you own it virtually, right? Secondly, property, buying actual property, physical property. You can do that through a platform with something called a REIT. We won't go into that because personally, I think owning property is much better and we don't have the time. And then lastly, businesses, investing in your own business or investing in someone else's business. For most people, you just really want to stick to those three. And it all kind of, at the beginning, stocks to property to business really comes down to how much time and effort you want to put in versus speed. So with stocks, gold, commodities, bonds, that kind of thing where you're just pressing a button, it's very little time and effort. You need to understand the fundamentals. You need to pick up a strategy and that's it. It's a pressing a button every now and again. So there's very little time and effort involved. That way you can get pretty strong returns, but you can't work harder to get even better returns essentially. Property is like a hybrid. It's half investing, half business. So there's certain fundamentals to property that allows you to get better returns, but you've got to put a bit of time and effort and work into it. So for those people that want and willing to put more time and effort in to get there faster, produce better returns, property is a really, really great vehicle for that. And if you want to understand more why, then obviously go check out the other videos because we've gone into more detail there. Lastly, in a business, that's way more time and effort, right? Obviously, to build your own business requires a lot of work and effort. And often for your own business, you really need to put money in to invest in the business to allow it to grow faster. You can even do that with someone else's business. Now, we're not going to go into that one in detail here because it's not the topic of today. Because really, I would say that you're moving quite far away from investing. There's so much work involved that I would say that's more like an active job. Okay. So for today's topic, we're really going to focus on investing through an investment platform. So stocks, gold, commodities, bonds, that kind of thing, or property. And under what situation does it make sense to invest in each of these? And if you do want to, what does that actually look like? Because there's lots of choices within both of those categories.
Okay, so let's go through our two pre-prepared examples. We've got John Smith and Jane Doe. In John's example, he's got a $2,000 desired cost of living per month. He's risk adverse, time poor, wants to do this with minimal effort, is not in a rush to retire. He actually enjoys his job as well and is happy to coast to a slightly earlier retirement. He's starting at age 23, happy to take it slow, and it's achievable for him to save £500 a month. And then we've got, on the other end of the spectrum, Jane Doe. She's got a £3,000 desired cost of living, wants to retire as early as possible, hates her job, willing to put in the effort early on to speed up. Let's say she's starting at age 27 and wants to retire ASAP. It's achievable for her to save $1,500 per month. Let's go into these two examples.
Okay, so with the example of John Smith, right? Wants a desired cost of living around £2,000 a month, right? Risk averse, wants to take it easy, time poor, doesn't want to spend too much time on things, happy to coast retirement, happy for it to take a little longer, doesn't want to save as much as someone else, is comfortable with £500 a month, right? Starting at 23, that person, okay, if they invest in the stock market, which has performed 14% over the last 40 years on average, 10% over the last 100 years, we can use an assumed return of 7% a year. And that's a pretty good number. That allows you to factor in inflation, because I'm going to talk about numbers now, but I'm going to talk about numbers in today's terms, because obviously it's great to say, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire in the future. But if it's a millionaire in 100 years, well, that's obviously worth a lot less than £1 million right now, right? Yeah. So when I'm talking about how much they're going to have in terms of money or spending ability, that's in today's money. Okay. So if they invest in the stock market, John does, okay, they would be able to retire 13 years earlier than the normal retirement age, right? By that point, they would have had they'll be able to retire 13 years before the normal retirement age. So let's just take a step back. This is a person, all they're saving is £500 a month, right? Consistently. Now, for some people might think, oh, that's loads, I can't do that. Well, okay. All right. Well, then that's the first thing you need to sort out. Get control of your spending and maybe make a little bit more money. But for anyone, getting to a point, being able to save £500 a month consistently is absolutely doable. And that's why you need to make sure you're addressing all three pillars, not just the investing. Also remember, this is across the whole of John Smith's life, right? So the beginning, obviously £500 is going to be difficult because they're not earning as much money. But towards the end of their life, they're going to be earning a lot more money and going to be able to save a lot more money than £500. Okay. But let's just assume this situation. They're able to retire 13 years earlier than the normal retirement age, right? Now, people might say, oh, but that's not like really quick. I want to do it tomorrow. Yeah, okay. And we can talk about ways you can speed this up. But to be able to comfortably live 13 years earlier, retire 13 years earlier than most people, and actually most people really struggle when they come to retirement age, that's a massive win. And what I'm helping you see here is that with some really modest numbers, you can do this very easily, very simply, and with very little effort. The other thing to point out is if for whatever reason he was like, you know what, I'm just going to crack on. I'm good. I like my job. I'm pretty relaxed. I like my life. I don't need to retire 13 years earlier than the normal retirement age. I'm just going to keep things going until the normal retirement age. At that point, John would have amassed £1.6 million, and that would allow him at that point to be able to spend on average £5.3 thousand a month while still being able to protect his wealth and still be able to do well. Now, what I'm helping you see here is by just allowing things to go on a little bit further, you can make way more money and be able to get to a position where you can spend way more and have a much more comfortable and a much more enjoyable life, right? So by tweaking these things, we can improve things massively.
Cool. Excellent. And now going on to the example of Jane Doe.
So the example of Jane Doe, this is someone that wants to retire with a bit more money, so £3,000 a month. She's starting a little bit later at 27. She's willing to put a bit more time and effort into getting there. She hates her job, so she wants to do it as fast as possible. And she's in a situation where she's earning a bit more money, she's in control of her finances, and she's able to comfortably save £1,500 a month. Now, for this person, given that she's willing to put a bit more time and effort into it, she wants to retire as quickly as possible. In this example, it would make more sense to go with the property investing strategy, because this way she can reliably make a much higher return. Very comfortable. We talked about in previous videos, so go check that out if you understand the basis behind this. But you can very comfortably expect a 15% annual return from investing in property, because you've got the rental income, you've got the property growth increase, like the capital appreciation, and there's ways to be able to use that money. And by doing that, you can expect a 15% return. Now, if you crunch the numbers, essentially Jane Doe can retire in just 10 years. Now that's huge, right? Because here you've got a person that, wants a pretty decent lifestyle. £3,000 a month is pretty decent. All right. This isn't crazy property investing. This is vanilla, basic buy-to-lets by utilizing the fundamentals of property, like leverage, like the fact that it goes up at least with inflation, the fact that you've got the capital appreciation and the rental income and so on, you can get a much higher return. And by doing that, she can get to a place where she's able to live comfortably without having to work in just 10 years. And this is assuming what we call a drawdown rate of 10%, so much lower than the expected return. And the reason why it's so different between stocks and property is that generally speaking, people expect like a 10% return from stocks. So maybe 7% once you factor in inflation in terms of expected return, but you can only safely draw down around 4% because of the volatility. With property, because of the much higher expected returns, your expected return can be around 15% after factoring in inflation. And you can then be able to reliably take out much more of your money each month and each year safely, while still protecting the money itself and allowing it to continue to grow. So in this example, we've assumed a 10% drawdown rate. So that's drawdown rate just simply means how much you're taking out each year. So if you've got £100,000 saved in, say, property, you can expect to be able to use 10% of that, £10,000 each year reliably and safely. Okay. Now, obviously with the rental profit, that's nice and easy. It comes in with when the property goes up in value. The way you're able to access that is by effectively the value going up and then either selling the property or by refinancing at that higher value, taking that money and either, using it in some way, maybe buy further properties and get rental income that way, or, there's ways to use that money. Okay. Now, for me, I did it even more aggressively, right? I turbocharged this, and I'm not saying everybody needs to go away and do what I did, right? Like, obviously this is something I'm very passionate about. I spent a lot of time and energy on it. I was all about doing it as quickly as possible. And so, hey, some people watching this might want to replicate what I did, but I'll just go through this in a little bit of detail, just so you can get inspired and kind of see what is possible, right? So the way I did it super fast was, again, let's take the 3 pillars: earn, save, and invest. Okay. Well, earning, I was making around £50,000 when I was working at EY towards the end. When I moved to freelance, I tripled my income. Literally, I was earning about £140,000 a year. Now that's crazy. That's a lot of money. And for some people, it might just feel like impossible, but going freelance is a very straightforward way to massively increase your income. The second thing I did was I kept my finances in check. So I had an amazing lifestyle, but I kept how much I was spending very controlled. And as I was earning more and more money, I made sure I didn't increase my spending that much. And the best way I did this was by, if you think about what actually gives you value and enjoyment, it's things that are basically free or cost very little. It's time with friends, family. It's catching up. It's good quality conversations, right? Even think about things that cost money, like going for dinner or drinks. The enjoyment is from the connecting with someone else. It's not from the drink or the meal. Yes, that gives you value, but way less. And even if those things give you value, have that person come around for dinner. You go out for drinks, have 1 drink, don't have 8 drinks, right? So that's what I did. I kept my spending in check. So I saved most of that. And to the point where I was saving like £7,000 a month, which sounds like a crazy amount to people. But if you're earning really high income and you're not spending that much, that is absolutely possible. I'm not the only person who's done it. Lots and lots of people have also done that. And then when it comes to investing, what I did was I went into property. Started with stocks, expected 10 to 14% return, but then I moved to property where I was getting kind of 5% from rental yield and like 21% from capital appreciation returns. But then what I was doing was I was increasingly moving up the ladder of more advanced strategies in property, HMO, refurbs, below market value deals. I was moving into raising funding. I was service accommodation. All these things allowed me to get better and better returns. I started to combine them. And so I was getting at least, 30% plus in terms of returns from my money. So let's just run this again, okay? Just to give another scenario, right? Now, obviously, my journey changed over time, right? It wasn't static. But to keep things simple, if you started at £0 and you were saving £7,000 a month, right? And your return rate was 30%, okay? In just 4 years, you would have £520,000 in wealth, okay? Now, and then, which is about £4,300 per month in spending income if you're invested in property, okay? So in 4 years, you've got £500,000 and you're in a position where you can comfortably spend over £4,000 a month without having to work. Pretty amazing situation, right? 4 years, you can basically retire. In 10 years, you go from zero to £3.6 million. I mean, that's just a bonkers number, right? And in that scenario, again, assuming you're in property, assuming just a 10% drawdown, you can spend £30,000 a month comfortably and not have to work. So a huge amount of money per month, right? So, and then let's just take this to the silly extreme, right? So, the typical amount of years people work in their lifetime is 40 years, right? So let's say you just did this for 40 years. Yeah. You had good income, 140,000. You were saving £7,000 a month and you were getting a 30% return rate, right? Because you were investing in property and in more advanced strategies. In 40 years, you would reach £40 billion. Let's just say that again, £40 billion, right? And these aren't mental numbers, right? £7,000 a month. For a lot of people might seem crazy, but if you make a really high income and you keep your spending in check, absolutely doable. I've done it. Many others have. Getting a 30% return rate is absolutely doable on property. I do it. Many others do. You just have to put a bit more time and effort, work out, and get these more sophisticated strategies. And then lastly, the 40 years is a not mental time. This is what most people work in their lifetime.
How would someone check these numbers / do this planning for themselves?
Yeah. So, well, firstly, I've got a really easy free tool that you can use. It's a spreadsheet. We'll link it into the show notes. So you can put in your details and keep track of this stuff. What I call my financial freedom scenario planner. So you can see how things change. We'll also link to an independent website that's just got a really easy to use tool where you can just put in stuff like, how many years do you want to work? What's your expected return rate? How much money are you saving each month? You put it all in and it will tell you, this is how much money you will have saved. And this is how it will change year to year. It's a really, really easy tool. And that way you can both stress test the numbers we talked about here and see for yourself that they're correct. And also, even more importantly, you can get to your own numbers. So you can play around with it and see what am I comfortable saving? What strategy am I comfortable doing? And what would I expect the return to be using that strategy? And therefore, and then how long am I willing to work? Or do I want to work? And then see where would I get to? All right. So that's super powerful. The only thing you want to do, and which is in my tool, and you might want to add on with the independent site, is then converting that to how much money do I need to get to be in a position to retire? And very simply, to keep it really easy, if you're picking stocks and that kind of stuff, then it's multiply your monthly income by 300. So let's say you want to be able to spend £2,000 a month in retirement, right? Then you just say 2 times 300 is £600,000. That's the number you want to aim for. If you want to pick the property approach and you are going with the kind of vanilla, not what I'm doing, not the crazy stuff, just vanilla buy-to-lets, but you're doing it sensibly and properly and you're using good fundamentals, then you can use the number of 120. So again, if it's £2,000 a month you want in retirement, 2 times 120 is £240,000. That's the number you're aimed at.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent. Cool. Okay, that's super, super strong. Thinking about one point of this, which is at the moment, these scenarios are static. Could you speak to the point around how these are static scenarios, but people's life circumstances change, their priorities change. Could you speak to that piece around how that changes the speed at which you go?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest issues people fall into is they get obsessed with getting to a place where they can just press a button, retire, and then under no circumstances will there be an issue. But the reality is our lives change like from right? So the way I always say to all my clients, right, is you want to be able to hold two things in your hand. Um, you want to be able to take a position as if things aren't going to ever change, so that you can make a decision, that you can commit to something consistently. You've got an endpoint to work towards. So the way I like to think is like there's a gun to your head, and someone's saying, "What do you want? When do you want to retire by? How much do you want to live off? Like, what are you comfortable doing? How much, like getting to answers to these questions quickly with your gut." But then also just acknowledge that things change. You may not want kids now and then you change, you want kids. Maybe you like your job and then actually now you don't like your job. Maybe you start investing in property and you're like, this is boring. I don't like this anymore. I want to go do something else. I want to run my own business, right? Things change and that's okay. But it's really, really important to kind of, as at today, what is your best view as to where you want to be and the direction you want to go in? And off the back of that, make a plan as if that is the case. But everything is changeable. But so long as you're working towards that and it's generally in the right direction, you'll be fine.
Excellent. Okay, let's stress test this a little bit. Let's think about in Jane Doe's example, what if, say, actually she was, 15 years older. She's not 27, she's 42. How would that change the dynamics?
Well, like I said, in that situation, she's going to retire in 10 years. So if it's 42, okay, yeah, she's 42. She's like, geez, I need to get on and sort this out, right? Otherwise, I'm going to run out of money and really struggle when I get to retirement age, when I can't work. Still 10 years. Okay, so it's 42, right? Okay, so it's 10 years and it's 52. Well, 52 is still 15 years quicker than the typical retirement age, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, okay, maybe she wants to do it quicker than 10 years. Well, like I said, I gave my example. You can just start to pick that up a little bit more. All right, maybe not do vanilla buy-to-lets. Maybe go to HMOs. Maybe do service accommodation. Maybe do a refurb, right? And getting these other little bits will allow you to get an even better return in property, give you a higher return, build that money up quicker, allow you to retire on less money, and then be able to go from, say, 10 years to 8 years to 6 years, 5 years, whatever that was important to Jane. But as long as she's willing to put the effort in to improve the returns from what she's pursuing, the better able she's going to get what she wants.
Gotcha. Okay. And now let's think about maybe in John Smith's example. He has 5 kids. His cost of living has gone way up, and he can't eliminate one of his kids. He's got to look after all 5 of them. What would you say to him in that example?
And this is very real for a lot of people. That a lot of people out there is feeling like, save £500. Like, I'm in debt. I can't even save £1, right? I got 5 kids. There's like, there is never enough money. And I get it. Like that is a super different example. And like, I don't have kids, right? So there's a part of that I'll never appreciate that. But I think the key thing to bear in mind is that you always have control, right? There's always things you can do. Sometimes it might feel really difficult, but you can. There are ways to improve your income. There's ways to reduce your spending. There's ways to improve your returns, right? So no matter how difficult your situation might feel, there's things you can do, right? So you could go for that promotion. You could move into another industry where you're earning a bit more money, right? Doing the same job. You could move to another country where they pay you more. Maybe let's say you're a teacher, right? And you've got a modest income. If you move to Dubai or you worked at a different school where they paid you more money, you'd be able to improve your income that way, right? And a lot of people might say, oh, I can't move to Dubai. That's okay. I'm not saying you need to move to Dubai, right? But there are lots of options out there that can allow you to improve your situation. It just comes down to how much you want this, how much you want to be able to start to improve these levers of how much you earn, how much you save, and how much you invest to be able to start getting on the process of being able to to get to financial freedom and then speed it up. So John Smith's example, he's 23, right? He's got 5 kids at 23. He's doing well for himself, right?
Oh my guy.
Right, my guy. So, but even still, right? Like moving to a country with a lower cost of living is a huge thing. I just came back from Bali. I mean, the quality of life for the cost of living is insane, right? A really amazing life. Again, if you don't want to go to Bali, no worries, but that is an option for you, right? And there's loads of places within this country, the UK, and other countries where you can get a much better quality of life and spend less, even with 5 kids, right? So changing location, changing job, moving to freelance or business or something like that, where you can improve that income, will allow you to go from a place of being able to not save at all to start to save, or to go from saving a little to more. All right. So that is a really important thing. And then when it comes to investing, in John Smith's example, it's a stock market. Like, it's a press of a button, even with 5 kids and all that comes with that. It's straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And now thinking about in Jane Doe's example, let's say she's gone down the property route. She hasn't gone crazy, but maybe she's expanded the kind of complexity of deals that she's doing in property. And either through lack of judgment or maybe real unfortunate circumstances and bad luck, her property portfolio has collapsed. What would you say in that example?
Well, how did it collapse?
Let's say let's say the market crashed, and at the same time, her life expenses went up massively. Let's say she's living in the US and she had a broken leg and had medical bills. So she suddenly had these medical bills, and she felt at the time, whether or not it was correct, that the best way to get that money quickly was to sell her 2 properties. So she got rid of her properties. It was an overall loss. She paid off her medical bills. She's now neutral again. She's no longer in debt, and she's 35.
Okay. So, well, firstly, like, this is one of the most important things you need to protect against when investing in property, right? One, because you're concentrating your money in an area. 2, you're concentrating in just a few properties, or like one property or whatever. So, it's a bit more like, if something goes bad in that one thing, you're more exposed, right? And then there's just large amounts of money. So an issue in that space can cause a big change in your finances. That being said, there's various things you can do to protect against that, right? So the first thing you want to do is on the prevention side. So, what I would advise someone else to make sure they don't get into that situation, or to Jane Doe, so that if she were to do it again, she would avoid that, is making sure you've got these protective mechanisms in place. So, for example, for me, I always have a good amount of money in cash and also in other investments, so that if property was to decline or there would be some big problem, I have money available elsewhere. So one, if I need to spend money and property's down, instead of having to sell a property, I can sell something else that's doing better, like either cash or something else. Secondly, if some problem happens, like all of a sudden my income dries up, right? I don't know, I've got a few tenants that aren't paying because, I don't know, there's a big crisis and no one's paying or whatever. The bank's coming to me, where's my mortgage? Where's my mortgage? I've got money available to pay them. If everything's just stuck in property, then you're really stuck, because the rent goes and you can't pay your mortgages, and not paying your mortgage is the big risk. Like, when you take the 2008 crash, the people that got screwed was not the people that went into negative equity, and that means that the value of the property went down, or like a lot. It's people who weren't paying their mortgage. Think about it. If you're a lender, you're not going to want to force someone to sell their property at a loss, because that means that you're forced into a loss. That lender's forced to lose money, number one. And 2, it just doesn't look good. You're forcing that person into a really bad financial situation. You're not in the market of selling properties. You're in the market of lending. They hate it. They will not do it unless they really, really have to. And the time they feel they have to is when you're not paying the mortgage, because then what's happening is it's just worsening more and more and more and more. And they're worried it's just going to get, they want to just protect it. So So always make sure that you have money available elsewhere to deal with difficult situations. Just make sure you're not over leveraging at a time when things are going really crazy. So look back in history. Every time there was a property went down substantially, it was a time when property was crazy and everyone was obsessed with it and everyone thought it was amazing and everybody was convinced that it was just going to keep going up. You never get a crash like that when things are just normal or just like pessimistic, which is why, ironically, when recently, the last few years, when things were really negative, yes, they went down, but like 5%, like that's not going to cause an issue. And even then, like people were paying their rent. In fact, rents have gone up crazy recently. Okay. So that's how you prevent it. What I would tell Jane Doe is, okay, learn from your mistakes, put these mechanisms in place. So when you go again, you're fine with that. And then we talked about in a previous video, attack and defense. Property is your attack. Attack, go as quickly as possible, as quickly as you want to. But you need that defense. You need those foundations. So having money elsewhere will give you those nice, strong foundations, right? And the more aggressive you go on attack, the more defense you need, right? Because like there's more things that could go wrong. And so you need more protective mechanisms in place.
Gotcha. Cool. Makes sense. Okay, let's look at John's scenario. What would you say to someone in his scenario who doesn't feel comfortable just going with the stock market?
I actually don't recommend just the stock market. So firstly, the traditional worldview is like 60% stocks, 40% bonds or something like that, or like higher in stocks, and as you get close to retirement, more bonds. Like this is the old school view. My personal view is bonds are rubbish, mainly because interest rates are low. We're going to be on an upward trajectory. Bonds will go down in value, and they already went down enormously recently. They have a very low inherent like return because they're very like viewed much safer than stocks. So this is an investment advice. I'm just saying, I just don't think they're very good for a whole load of reasons. That being said, you do want to create some kind of diversification. That just means investing in different things, right? Not all in one thing. And so I personally prefer gold, commodities, and crypto outside of stocks. That's because typically stocks don't do well in inflationary times, high inflation times, and low economic growth times. Gold and commodities typically do well in those times. And crypto is a bit of a different one. That's just because it's a new area and there's a view that it will increasingly become a whole asset class in itself and do phenomenally well. So I think if you feel comfortable investing in something like that, it's good to have an amount of money in it so that one, you don't have the fear of missing out, but not over focused on it. But again, you don't need to at all. So the rough split I do is 70% stocks, 10% gold, 10% commodities, 10% crypto. That just means that those other areas can it smooths out the curve. So if you go through periods where the stock market's not doing so well, the other areas don't typically go down. If they do, not as much. And so you don't feel it in the same way. So that's really helpful. Okay. But if you want to include bonds there, you can absolutely do that. Just make sure you're kind of educating yourself around that and just making sure that you stay consistent with it, because if you're going in and out at the wrong times, then that also is not good. Within stocks, you can also diversify. So you don't want to just be putting all your money in, say, Apple stocks, right? We have this thing called an ETF or an index fund, which just simply means you're buying something that just has a whole load of stocks in it. So probably the most famous one is something called the S&P 500, which is just basically a fund with the 500 largest value companies listed in the US. And it's just a really easy way of diversifying across a whole load of different companies. Me personally, I don't want to just be invested in any one country. So I do 70% the US, 10% developed, excluding the US, 10% emerging, and then 10% value stocks. And again, that's because in the world, 60% is in the US, 30% in developed, and 10% roughly in emerging, right?
It's almost like an all world index fund in some
Yeah,
way.
exactly. So just to keep it super simple, you can literally buy funds that are just the whole world.
I like that. And you're betting on the human race, basically.
Exactly. And, we've done pretty well so far, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if we don't, this is a really important point because a lot of people go, oh, the world's going to end. There's all these problems. AI is going to kill us. Well, yeah. But then if that happens, we've got way bigger problems to worry about than our stock portfolio, right? So to just keep things super simple, you can just do an all world index fund, or you could do all developed world, right? So then you don't have to worry about all the emerging market countries and, the complexities there. So in summary, like if you just feel really nervous about just investing in a stock or just one country or something, you can diversify quite simply in the ways I've explained. But just make sure you don't have a bias to your country, okay? Because like, for example, the UK has performed really poorly over the last few decades. Because let's be honest, it's a declining economy compared to, say, the US. So I invest primarily in the US, not because I love the US, but just because they are the largest economy in the world, and there is a competitive advantage there, which just allows them to produce a better return. So I wanna be able to leverage that.
Gotcha. And now making this hyper specific and real for someone watching. For someone watching, what is your general advice? What is the first action they could take to go on this journey?
Okay, first, decide, is this something you actually want to do? Do you want to become financially free? Because you need to be honest with yourself. Because if you don't really, then you just need to go on and actually focus on what you do care about. If you do, you need to acknowledge that you need to put time and attention on this, focus on it, and make it a must. Make it something that you're deciding to do and working on, just like anything else you would in your life. Then start to put together a plan of how you're going to get there. Obviously, this mini series is a great start, but then start to produce more content until you start to get a better and better understanding of how you're going to do this. Okay. To be able to understand what you want to do, you need to understand first, what is important to you? So is it getting there as fast as possible? Is it getting there with the least effort possible? Go through all the various things that are important and then land on that. Broadly, it comes down to earning as much money as possible, saving as much money as possible within the realm of what feels comfortable for you, right? Within all the other things that you care about. And then in investing, it really broadly just comes down to stocks, property, or business. And unless you really want to, the problem with business is it's a lot less reliable. Most businesses fail. They're an enormous amount of work, take a long time to get to like an exit. And even then, it's not really investment. So I would say pick, is it stocks or is it property? Am I willing to put some effort in and do property? Or go for the kind of more chilled route and go with stocks plus some other things to diversify. And then within that, how quickly do I want to do the stocks? Okay, great. Well, then the main thing is earn as much money as possible and save as much money as possible. If I'm going with the stock route, again, it's obviously earn and save is important, but then you can then decide how much time and effort you want to put in to be able to improve your returns and then speed up how quickly you get there. And I would always say, start something simple and vanilla with property. Start with a good, solid, fairly new buy-to-let in a safe area that you know is going to do well. Get some experience, buy a couple of properties. Once you know what you're doing, then you can start to go to more advanced strategies if you feel comfortable and confident about doing that. When it comes to the other option, John Smith's option of stocks, just come up with what you want. Is it total world? Is it, some bonds, some gold, whatever? Like decide what that is. Set up with an investment platform like Fidelity or Hargreaves Lansdowne or whatever, right? There's loads out there. Just set up with an investment platform. Start putting in each month. It's much easier to invest in a way where a lot of these platforms have this thing where you can automatically pay in, say the £500 a month, like John Smith's example, automatically goes in every month and it will automatically invest in what you want it to. So if you wanted to just do total world stock market index fund, you just tell Fidelity, put this £500 in this fund every month. super easy and simple. And because you're not pressing a button on £10,000, you're just pressing a button on money going out your account in the future, which is a small amount each month. It feels much easier and comfortable doing. That's where you start in those two scenarios and let the rest unfold from there.
Excellent. Love it. Okay. This is the end of our 4-part series. We'll be sending a link to James's LinkedIn where he's regularly sharing content, and we'll also have a link to the various resources that have been mentioned. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Oosh.
Cheers.
Okay.